Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. I've got a great live Q&A for you today. If you are new to the show, um, the name of the game is Ask Your Nutrition Questions. You've got questions, we've got answers. If you missed Tuesday's show with Dr. William Davis, world-renowned author of Wheat Belly and Super Gut, you make sure you go check that interview out. It's full of fantastic information on a number of different things, but predominantly around the topic of probiotics, specifically L-reuteri. And so if you haven't checked that out, I encourage you to do so. Additionally, if you haven't visited us at Gluten-Free Society, I encourage you to do that as well. We don't do sponsors. The way you can support us is to visit Gluten-Free Society and shop our products. We have over 100 different products available, supplements and lab testing for nutritional deficiencies and gluten sensitivity that you can tap into on your journey to better health. So thanks for tuning in. Let's dive into your questions now. Let's see here. We've got already a full box here. Have you ever seen, or do you make a supplement with enough L-reuteri to eradicate SIBO or SIFO, or should it be the homemade yogurt? Both. You could do the homemade yogurt. Certainly, that's an option. You can culture it. It doubles. Rather quickly when you culture it at home. So you can certainly make your own yogurt, but you can also buy L-reuteri supplementation and take it orally. Do you think if it's possible that if a person has enough L-reuteri and other key probiotic species in their system, they might be less affected if they're living in mold? That's a great question. So one of the factors behind probiotics in mold is simply that mycotoxins that are produced by mold. So if you're in a moldy home and you've got mycotoxins circulating in your air, these mycotoxins can behave as antibiotics, meaning once they absorb into your body, they can get into your GI tract and other tissues. Once a mycotoxin is absorbed, it has systemic availability to go anywhere. But they act like antibiotics. So let's think about it in this sense. If we look at penicillin, which is kind of the most classic antibiotic, the original or OG of antibiotics, if you will, penicillin exerts its effects on the microbiome by killing bacteria. So penicillin rather is a mycotoxin. It is a toxin produced by the mold species Penicillium. Now, that being said, if you're living in an environment where you're being exposed to mycotoxins from Penicillium, would it affect or impact your microbiome? Yes. Would it potentiate death and demise and destruction of your GI tract's microbiome, of the healthy bacteria that naturally colonize your gut? Yes. We see this on a frequent basis when people are in mold. Now, you can take probiotics, and there's nothing wrong with that if you're living in mold, but it is not going to stop the invasive nature of mycotoxin exposure happening daily as you breathe air from poisoned, mycotoxin poisoned air. So, theoretically, we could say, yeah, take your probiotic and maybe it'll offset some of the damage that the mycotoxin is creating. But in reality, the only thing that's going to offset that damage is for you to get out of that environment. And so I just say that because I don't want to encourage anyone to stay in their mold and think, oh, I'm going to stay in my mold, but just take a probiotic instead. Certainly, if you're trapped and you're struggling to get out, you can try taking a probiotic, but I wouldn't use it as a means to justify staying in a moldy environment. Okay, let's see here. Watching the fatty liver class, I enjoyed your talk. The more I hear, the more I think I understand why estrogen dominant, spider vein and estrogen dominant started in my teens. Okay, good. No, not so much a question. Jim's asking, with ALS, would it be possible to do a deep dive into it or convene a group of functional doctors to come up with a plan to cure it? Yes, it would be possible. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things that I have slated to cover. in a deep dive, Jim. So be patient with me, and I'll do my best to get that out for you quickly. You might also look at there was another doctor, this was a few years ago. Her name is Shel Lalji. She's a medical doctor actually in Sugar Land, Texas, next door to me almost. And her husband had ALS. And she did something very similar where she gathered a large group of functional doctors to try to come up with best strategies and best practices. So you might want to just look her up and see if she's got that published. I don't know if she published that to the public or not, but I know she was working on that diligently to try to help her husband. What exact form of inulin should we use in the yogurt making? Just a grain-free source, Tyler. I mean, there's a lot of different types of inulin. I think, stevia is a source of inulin fiber. So just make sure that the inulin that you're going to purchase and buy doesn't have any grain-contaminated ingredients. And for a list of those, you can visit Gluten Free Society and type in the search foods to avoid, and that'll give you back a long list of terms that might be gluten, hidden tricky words that they commonly use on food labeling, etc. Let's see, Pitt says, can sugar fructose also lead to ages? I assume you mean advanced glycation end products when you say ages, which is basically an oxidized, damaged protein as a result of excessive sugar. And the question is, can fructose do it, or is it just white sugar? No, fructose can cause it as well. Will mycobinders interfere with absorption of other supplements? You're asking about my supplement, Mycobinder Plus. Does that interfere with absorption of other supplements? It does if you take them at the same time. So it's always best with Mycobinder, you'd want to take that at least an hour away from other supplements on the front or the back end. It's best taken also on an empty stomach. So I think there were a couple of you asking that question today. So regarding Tuesday's video, what would your RE pipe be for the yogurt? Maybe you mean recipe. Maybe that's a typo. Yeah, I mean, you could use coconut milk instead of half and half, or of dairy. So especially those of you that are reactive to dairy, coconut milk can be used as an option. I don't recommend the other milks, the other like almond or other plant-based milks, but coconut milk would work. It actually has carbohydrate in it that can be fermented by the bacteria. How much space does making yogurt take? Not much space. I mean, you can make it pretty easy on your counter, Melinda. As far as fancy equipment, not really. You can type in a couple of searches using any kind of major search engine on yogurt. How to make yogurt tutorials on YouTube, etc. And you're going to find that it's not challenging, it's not hard, it's actually quite easy and doesn't require a lot of space or special fancy equipment. Let's see here. What supplements would you recommend for somebody who has TBI? I assume you mean traumatic brain injury. High dose fish oil, hands down. With TBI, 8 to 10 grams of omega-3. If you're looking for a good fish oil, I would recommend Ultra Omega or Omega Max from Gluten Free Society. But with TBIs, there's been pretty good research in that regard on using high dose fish oil for beneficial recovery. As far as other supplements, I definitely would recommend B vitamins in that regard as well. They're very critical for nerve tissue repair, especially B1 and B12 and folate. But you might also consider testing if you really want to know supplements, based on your unique situation and need. There's no better way to know what you need than to test for deficiency, because if you have deficiency, now you can get ultra customized, and you don't have to follow a generic recommendation. You can follow what your body actually needs. Let's see here. My doctor told me to cut my Synthroid to 5 days a week. I only take 0.88. Can you explain to me what causes this problem? That's from Patricia. Well, I'm not sure what you mean by what causes this problem. If your doctor's asking you to reduce your dose, um, I don't, if you're talking about what causes hypothyroidism, maybe that's your question, Patricia. I don't know. Maybe you can reword it. But if you haven't watched my crash course on thyroid, nutrition in the thyroid, you've got to check that crash course out. Very valuable. Nutrition is responsible for helping your thyroid hormone be produced and to function properly. Um, and if your doctor's told you to lower it from 7 to 5 days a week, I would encourage you, far be it for me to act as your doctor in this context, but I would encourage you to talk to your doctor about that recommendation because um, thyroid hormone has a half-life, and him having you not take it 2 days a week, it's not a great idea for balance. Like, you should adjust your dose accordingly to the daily dose, and not necessarily have you skip dosing 2 days a week. That doesn't fly with the half-life of thyroid hormone. So I would just encourage you to have a conversation with your doctor about the timing of all that. Hi, Dr. O. Taking your Omega Max for 1 week now. Testing shows 6-to-0 ratio. I eat no processed carbs, sugars, and fat. Protein, a high protein diet. When you say a 6-to-0 ratio, what are you referring to, Vera? Because ratios mean you're comparing two different things. You're talking about Omega Max. So what ratio are we referring to? If you had your omega-3 levels checked, there's two ratios, generally speaking. There's arachidonic acid to EPA ratio, and then there's also omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Are you referring to one of those ratios? Um, and if your ratio is a 6, you'd probably want to increase your dose. I don't know how much of the Omega Max you're taking. If you're taking one capsule, that generally is enough to get people to about 5 to 6% on an Omega score. But it's not enough. One capsule is not enough to get your omega-6-3 ratio down below 4 where it needs to be. So again, if you give me better context, I can give you a better answer. And the other thing is you've only been taking it 1 week, so that would be another thing that I wouldn't recommend getting a test after just 1 week. I'd recommend being on it for several weeks before actually considering testing. Taking arginine with POTS is not a good combo given potential blood pressure decrease. I don't know that I would make that statement. Do I experiment, or is there a specific dose? Most of the really good research on arginine lowering blood pressure is, you got to get upwards of 2-3 grams or higher a day of arginine. So if you were just wanting to use arginine supplementally, I would start with 500 milligrams and maybe work your way up to about 1500 and just monitor your blood pressure and just see if it becomes a problem. Your blood pressure being 120/80, that's a good blood pressure. It's a nice average blood pressure. But I'm going to give you context. Like, my blood pressure is like 106/55, somewhere in that neighborhood. So some people would say, wow, that's super low blood pressure. That's dangerously low. No, it isn't. Your blood pressure is your blood pressure. And so what yours averages out to be over time, you want to have an idea of what that is, as a general rule of thumb, for context. Because especially when you start adding in a supplement that has a potential to lower the blood pressure, if it's lowering it below your normative, then that might make you a little tired, or contribute to some other issues that you may not want to deal with. So anyway, I hope that's helpful for you. My mom has a high TSH level. Let's see here. Where did it go? Sorry, the questions update and then the feed goes crazy. So give me a second. I got to find that question again. Here we go. My mom has high TSH levels. We're noticing some memory issues, repeating stories, and misplacing personal items. Would her thyroid function be the cause? It might be. I mean, it might be contributing to it. So it's certainly worth investigating and having her doctor take a deeper look. How high are her TSH levels? I mean, that would be, another question. And also, Nazila, TSH is just, if it's high, it generally might mean that the thyroid function is low, but you should also have your mom's T3 and T4 checked, because if her T3 and T4 are both normal, then her memory issues are probably not related to the thyroid. And TSH is a screening tool, but it's not definitive for whether or not somebody is high hypothyroid. What nutrients could be deficient with neuroinflammation? Lots of nutrients could be deficient with neuroinflammation. I mean, inflammation is inflammation, whether it's nerve inflammation, heart inflammation, skin inflammation, etc. And any form of inflammation can cause attacks. Think of it as inflammatory attacks on your nutritional status. And here's why. Your body uses nutrients to put out inflammation and to heal the damage that inflammation causes. So, any kind of inflammation that's chronic or prolonged can drive nutritional deficiency of all different types of varieties. Now, that being said, what do we see in clinic that works really, really well for neurological problems like neuropathy, which is a form of neural inflammation? You've got to look at vitamin B1 and B12 and B2 and folate and B6. You've also got to look at omega-3s, especially DHA, because all of those play a major role in repairing from neural inflammation. Can I get arginine through citrulline? Yes, you can. If citrulline is a precursor to the amino acid arginine. So if you're taking citrulline, you can actually, your body can convert that into arginine and subsequently into nitric oxide. If have to reduce arginine due to POTS, don't understand your question. But will I still get some impact on human growth hormone? Well, the only way you will know that is if you're monitoring your human growth hormone. So anytime we're talking about trying to take a supplement to get a benefit or an effect on an in-stream or downstream chemistry, the only way you're truly going to know that is if you're monitoring it. So the thing to do there would be to measure your growth hormone initially, start taking arginine, and have it remeasured again in about 4 weeks and see if it's impacting your growth hormone. Can type A consume coconut milk yogurt? I know coconut is a no for type A. I don't subscribe to that. That coconut is unacceptable for somebody with type A, Tyler. That you may be referring to the work of Peter D'Adamo, the naturopathic doctor who wrote Eat Right for Your Type, for your blood type. But I don't subscribe to that same philosophy on coconuts and vitamin A, or not. So I'm sorry, not vitamin A, type A, blood type A. Lynn is asking, what's your stand on taking statin for high LDL while being on a keto diet? I have a low A1C, low insulin levels. Inflammation is low also. Look, I think LDL is the wrong target. That's my opinion of it. I think too many people and too many doctors have demonized LDL improperly. I mean, look at the statistics around cholesterol and heart disease and using statins. We've been using statins for 40 years plus. We don't have less heart disease. We don't have less stroke. We don't have less cardiovascular events. We actually have more. And that's including adjusting for population increase. So how is lowering cholesterol affecting the outcome of heart disease incidence or risk? Empirically, it's not. Now, the research that cardiologists like to cite all day long, if you look into those studies, a lot of those studies are funded, and there's bias and they're short-sighted, in my opinion. A lot of the studies are short-sighted, but I'm not a fan at all that LDL poses a risk for human health unless you have familial hypercholesterolemia where your cholesterol is driving up over 400 plus. Now there may be some merit in that regard. But if we're talking about your total cholesterol is 300 or less, and your LDL makes up even 150 plus of that, do I think that people should be scrambling to try to get it to lower? No, especially not in your situation where you have a low A1C and a low insulin level, and that your inflammatory markers are all normal. And especially if your triglyceride markers are normal, you might look at your lipoprotein A and make sure that's coming out okay as well. And you might also look at things like MMP9 or myeloperoxidase. These are also inflammatory markers that traditional doctors don't typically measure. But LDL, you should go back and watch. I have a video called The Cholesterol Myth, and I encourage any of you to watch it. And I'll end that rant on the fact that LDL, which we classically call bad cholesterol, won a Nobel Prize in medicine in 1998 because it was discovered that it was necessary to form brain synapses, something called synaptogenesis, meaning you can't form brain synapses without bad cholesterol. And by the way, you also can't make estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone without bad cholesterol. So why are we scrambling to lower it? Can L. reuteri be good for SIBO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, or Candida 2? I have found that lots of different strains can be good for SIBO, not just L. reuteri. So Lactobacillus as a family, there's reuteri, and there's rhamnosus, and there's Paracasei and Casei and Acidophilus. All those strains are fantastic where there's a SIBO issue or a Candida issue. Espellardi is also a great strain for that. So I wouldn't, in my practice, I wouldn't use L. reuteri as a standalone in that type of a situation. I would use more of a blend. And if you're looking for something similar to that, you can check out our Biotic Defense. Let's see. Thank you, Dr. Osborne, for helping so many of us. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. What are your thoughts on soft wave therapy for joint pain? Is it a gimmick? Currently drinking pineapple juice and also activated charcoal for parasites. Anything else? So, I mean, if you've got joint pain, is soft wave therapy a gimmick? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on why you have joint pain, Kay. There's a lot of reasons people develop joint pain. Is it an autoimmune inflammation? Is it an injury or trauma? Is it a arthritis? Is it an atrophy of the muscles leading to to a compression of the joint itself leading to pain? I would say the number one way to alleviate non-autoimmune joint pain, meaning if you don't have an autoimmune condition like rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis, but you have a joint pain that is prevalent, you need to make sure that that joint is being mobilized and moved on a regular basis. I mean, the classic examples of joint pain we see a lot in the practice are just people sitting at a desk for 8 hours and not moving, and so they develop atrophy in their joints, and their joints degrade and erode earlier. Remember the premise or the golden rule of use it or lose it. If you're not using your joints, they will deteriorate and become arthritic. So use your joints, move them, stretch them, exercise them. Even if you're in pain, do it to your tolerance, and maybe get with a good chiropractor who can help you navigate that, or get with a good physical therapist that can help you navigate that as well. But passive therapies for joint pain are fine. They can work really well, but here's the gimmick: they don't fix why your joint hurts. So if you don't solve that issue, it doesn't matter how many treatments you get, whether it's soft wave therapy or laser therapy or microcurrent therapy or ultrasound therapy, they're all short-lived, and none of them address the core reason as to why your pain exists. So they're great as adjuvants, but not great as a solution long-term. How do we get rid of toenail fungus? Well, I mean, when I see people with persistent toenail fungus, my first thought, Catherine, is, are they being immunocompromised? Because generally the immune system is strong enough to defeat fungus from growing underneath the nail beds. And so where we'll see toenail fungus is in somebody whose immune system is starting to go south. So I would get your get your levels tested, get your immune cells checked. You can ask your doctor. Very common test is called a complete blood count with differential, and that'll tell you about your white blood cells and whether you have enough of them, and whether you have the right percentages of them, etc. That might give you some insight into the strength of how well your immune system is working. Beyond that, and beyond kind of investigation, there's a number of things you can attempt. Soaking the toenail in peroxide, using essential oils like thyme or oregano or thieves oil or rosemary oil. Rosemary is used a lot as an oil in the food industry to prevent food from spoiling. And that's one of the things that spoil food is fungus. So, some of these oils have very potent antifungal properties that, you might also apply to your toenail as well. The key there, though, is one application is not going to do anything. You have to do repetitive, consistent application to be effective. Any suggestion on what variants of probiotics to use alongside the no grain, no pain diet for Crohn's specifically? Yes, Anna, use our Ultrabiotic Defense. It's a powder, and it's a very high dose probiotic. And so if you're dealing with the inflammatory bowel Crohn's, that will be the best recommendation I could give you. Use that one. It's called Ultrabiotic Defense. And let's see here. I'm flying solo today, so might with me, but I'll try to get a link up for you on that. Give me just a second. Let's see. We're waiting on things to load there. And Functional Doc put me on an 1/8 teaspoon of cholestyramine once per day. My liver enzymes just doubled and are high 3 weeks after starting a detox protocol. The question is this a liver detox dump? Possibly, but I'm personally not a fan of cholestyramine. It's a synthetic medication. It can affect the liver. So whether or not you're having a detox liver dump or whether you're having a side effect from the medicine itself, you need to determine that with your doctor. Number two, cholestyramine is a binder, and it works well to bind mycotoxins. However, it works really well to bind your fat. And one of the things that we see in people that are trying to recover from mold is a tremendous amount of fat-soluble vitamin deficiencies. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, but also omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies. And omega-3 is very critical for your recovery post-mold. The other thing that taking cholestyramine does is it lowers your cholesterol. And, at high doses on a daily basis, when you start pushing your cholesterol below 150, it can have neurological impact. In my opinion, it's just as detrimental as the mold itself, because you need that cholesterol for brain tissue to function properly. You also need it for hormones, especially the anabolic hormones. Testosterone, DHEA, and estrogen all help your body rebuild and repair after mold. And if you're taking something that blocks your cholesterol, you're also inadvertently, by default, blocking your body's ability to have the resource to make those hormones that act in the manner that stimulate healing and repair. So those are the reasons I'm just not a fan. I know a lot of doctors are. Again, I'm not trying to tell you you're doing something wrong. Maybe I would have that conversation with your doctor who's prescribing that and just bring these issues up. And also bring that issue up about your liver, because it's possible the medicines was creating the damage and not the detox itself. So you just want to be aware of what's going on. Okay, let's see. Next question here. Sorry, I'm still trying to grab that link for you. Multitasking is overrated. Let's see. Christina says, thanks for your good information about berberine. I was told that berberine will kill the good microbes in your gut. So how do you safely incorporate it without destroying good bacteria? Well, you can take a good probiotic, a mixture of different good probiotics, Christina, to kind of offset that. The other thing is, I would question, why are you taking berberine on a regular basis? To me, berberine is something that should be used in the short term temporarily. It has a lot of different effects and functions if you've watched my master class, but what's the premise of why you're taking it? If you're taking it to lower blood sugar or, for the Ozempic-like effects, and some people recommend it for longevity. I don't recommend it for any of those things. I think anytime you get into taking an antimicrobial herb indefinitely, you run the risk of creating problems as well. And so the purpose of any nutraceutical that is herbal in nature that has, the potential for medicinal effects is, why are we taking it? How long are we going to take it? And what are we going to be doing while we're taking it to resolve the core issue of the symptoms that we're taking it to try to resolve? And if you're doing those things, then you shouldn't need it indefinitely. But if you are taking it, I definitely recommend that you are on a probiotic in an attempt to, to offset some of that microbial degradation that can occur. Okay, so I was going to put up a link for Ultrabiotic chat feed there, so just look for that down below, and you should see it. Can one use raw milk when making the yogurt? You can, but if you're using raw milk, it's a bad idea if you're allergic to milk or dairy, or if you have a dairy intolerance. It's also a bad idea if you're using A1 style of milk. And if you don't know the difference between A1 and A2 milk, check out my crash course on dairy, where we go into those differences so that you can differentiate. But many people with gluten sensitivity also react to dairy. There's what's known as molecular homology between gluten and dairy, meaning they can mimic each other. And so if you're new to the gluten-free diet, especially, I would really caution against using dairy in that regard. Who do you think should be taking probiotics? Everyone, but I don't. And when I say that, let me give context to the statement. So everyone should be taking probiotics, but predominantly, the best way to do it is through natural fermentation of foods. So if you've got, I like to make sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, if you will. And that's a great way to get probiotics. Another great way to get probiotics is gardening. There have been numerous studies. The most interesting one I read a few weeks ago was on children who grew up on farms, and the incidence of allergies and asthma and autoimmune conditions, the diversity of their microbiome. And what we find in kids that grow up in the country with their hands in the dirt, farming, etc., they have a more diverse probiotic concentration in their microbiomes. And I think what's happened to most people is living urban. We germ spray everything, so we have germophobia, where everybody's washing their hands 25 times a day using hand sanitizer, spraying Lysol everywhere. You go to a gym and they've got all these cleaners that people are spraying all over stuff, and it's just, in my opinion, it's all bad form. You don't try to kill the things. These are, where you want to control bacteria is the overgrowth of it in your food supply, so that you don't get food poisoning or you don't eat something that causes infection. But as a general rule, you should have a strong and robust immune system and a diverse array of exposure to microorganisms. Anyway, I hope I answered your question. So if you live in the city and you don't garden and you don't have the proclivity to want to make sauerkraut or other fermented vegetables, then you're the type of person that should definitely be considering using a probiotic. And if you're celiac, Victoria, I would recommend just taking our Biotic Defense. It was actually designed with celiac disease in mind. Let's see. Does the salt from the ocean irritate the skin from someone who suffers with dermatitis? I mean, it might soothe your skin. I mean, the best way to know is to test it. Everyone's different in that regard. But as a general rule of thumb, ocean water is pretty soothing. Depending on how severe your dermatitis is. If you have active open lesions, getting salt in that might burn quite a bit. But if the skin is relatively intact, it shouldn't. Let's see. I've started taking turmeric and black pepper in warm water before bed. Now, I have had RA for the past year and a half, rheumatoid arthritis. Tired of taking tabs. Only works as long as I take. Any suggestions? Yes. Follow no grain, no pain. If you haven't read my book and you've got RA, start there first. We've seen thousands of cases of RA. Tremendous impact with diet change. And, that's part of the reason why I wrote No Grain, No Pain, was to help people who weren't coming to see me in my clinic. So start with the book, the diet in the book, and the lifestyle in the book. Let's see. Is there a limit to how many probiotic supplements we can or should take at one time? Many kinds coexist in our gut, so it seems no limit. I mean, I'm sure there is a limit, Laura, but nobody's really studied that. I would say, like with anything, just being a good judge of how you're reacting to something is start with, a singular product. And that way, instead of taking like 25 different kinds or varieties of probiotics, start with one, just kind of see how your body reacts and responds to it before you add the next. So just kind of a one at a time type of approach before you just toss a bunch of probiotics into the mix. Because probiotics are funny. For some people, they work fantastically well, and others, for the same exact conditions, not so much. So really playing with the different ones is probably one of the best things that you can do in your own life if you're trying to assess which probiotic would be good for you to take. But as far as we know, there's not been any great limit studies that have been done. And any probiotic that you take is like a drop of water compared to the vast amounts of bacteria living inside of your GI tract. Any thoughts on cultured versus non-cultured butter? Not really. I'm not a fan of cultured butter personally, but maybe I re-ask the question with more specific, more specifically, and I maybe give you different feedback. From where can I get the microbe to make the yogurt, as Dr. Williams mentioned? He has a website. If you go to Dr. William Davis's website, I think it's Oxynutrinic. Don't quote me on that. I might have mangled it. But if you just type in Dr. William Davis lactobacillus yogurt recipe, you're going to find that recipe, and you're also going to find the specific probiotic that he has, and you can get access to that. I have cut out glutens and my energy is up and inflammation is down, but my nerves in my legs are always jumping. Get your nutrition status checked, Florida. It's very common. There's a lot of different nutrition deficiencies that can cause jumping legs or restless legs, or even neuropathy in the feet and legs. The B vitamins can all contribute to that. Lipoic acid deficiency, iron deficiency, folate deficiency, just to name a few. Even minerals like calcium and magnesium deficiency can contribute. So get your nutrition status checked. That would be ideal, so that you could really target what might be helpful for you. And you can do that. I mean, those of you who don't have a doctor, a functional doctor who will measure it for you, you can go to Gluten Free Society, and we have a lab tab that you can click on, where you can get information about micronutrient testing, which I definitely encourage anyone who's looking at doing long-term supplements. my opinion, test, don't guess. Because you'll save a ton of money on supplements, first of all, because you'll take what you need instead of taking what you speculate might be beneficial. And I see a lot of people do that. I've had people come to my office bringing in suitcases of products, 50 products, 100 products, and just trying to do their best to navigate all the information. And so when you get testing done, though, it's unique to you, and it'll be what you need, and that is, in my opinion, going to be super helpful. What do you know about encapsulated citric acid? Why would you take encapsulated citric acid? If you're taking it as a vitamin C, I don't recommend it because it's generally synthesized by mold grown on corn, and just not something I would recommend. What nutrients do you recommend for disc bulge, L4, L5? You got to have vitamin C. You got to have zinc. Those two are critical, and copper. Those are critical for the formation of the collagen cross links that help nourish the disc. Outside of that, you got to make sure you're getting enough protein, especially proline and lysine and leucine in the branch chains. Leucine, isoleucine, and valine are going to be super important. Glutamine is going to be super important in that regard as well. How to heal from recurring tonsil stones. Tonsil stones generally are food allergies in disguise. So if you're getting recurring tonsil stones, you should get you should get yourself checked for food sensitivity and avoid those foods. We see tonsil stones all the time as a result of gluten consumption. So I mean, that's a good place to start if you haven't already. So those of you maybe that are new to the show and don't know much about the Dr. Osborne zone, this is a grain-free platform. We recommend gluten grain-free diets for people with chronic health inflammation issues. And if you haven't, a great place to start with diet is start with No Grain, No Pain. You can get the book on Amazon or any other national book retailer. But think of it as your starting place, right? If you're just generically wanting to get started, that diet change is the number one thing that you can do. Can salt trigger an autoimmune response? It could if it's contaminated with a bunch of heavy metal, because heavy metals can trigger. But salt in and of itself, if you're talking about just sodium and chloride, generally no. And again, unless the salt is contaminated with something. Let's see here. Question, my HDL is low on the scale, and that has been said that could be a cause for a heart attack, which I get anxious over just thinking of it. I do have AFib, and I'm on meds for that. If you're interested in increasing your HDL, omega-3 is one of the best ways to bring HDL up. You got to make sure, Carol, you're taking enough. If you're using our Omega Max, which is a premium metal and contaminant tested product, you take 2 to 3 capsules per day, and you check your HDL. Do that for a month. Go back and check your HDL. We see anywhere from 10 to, in some cases, 30, 40 point improvements in HDL on omega-3. So it's a great way to help get it up. The other thing you should do is go grain-free if you haven't already as well. Again, best place to start is diet change. And, with AFib, gluten can certainly play a role in that. And if you are gluten sensitive and that's part of what's driving your issue, diet change would be right up your alley. My daughter keeps developing warts. What to do? Change her diet, because if she's developing warts on a regular basis, a lot of times warts are fungal growths. And so again, if the diet's poor and the diet's immunosuppressive because it's lacking nutrients and full of calories, but lacking nutrients, that's the surefire way to crush the immune system and create problems. So, you got to make sure you check your daughter's diet. I don't know how old she is, but if she's a minor, the way I raised my kids, just the way I did it was they didn't have a choice about what they were eating as long as they were under the age of 18. Once they got old enough to do their own thing, then it was up to them. But we gave them the foundation for high quality food, high quality diet, so that they would understand what it was like to feel good, right? Because when you're coming from a place of good food, good sleep, good exercise, good sunshine, you have perspective of good health. And we wanted to make sure they had that so that when they, grew up and decided they wanted to, as all kids do, they break free from the nest and they want to deviate and they want to experience the world on their own terms, which is perfectly fine and understandable. But giving them that framework of normalcy around diet, yeah, I think is extremely important. So I don't know, how old your daughter is or where she's at in that regard, but if she's a minor, I'd highly encourage you to change her diet if she's eating poorly. How long do you think it should take to overcome sears with a functional doctor? I mean, if you moved out of the mold and your problem is just the mold, you should be feeling better within a matter of months, Laura, not a matter of years. Now, there may be other things going on. In my experience, when people tell me they've been to a functional doctor and then I review their case, they didn't go to a functional doctor. They went to a doctor who um, was practicing green medicine. Green medicine is when you give nutrients to appease symptoms without understanding why symptoms exist. Which, functional is when you're trying to find out why the symptoms exist. So I don't know what kind of doctor you're seeing or how long you've been being treated, but if you've been out of your home for a year and you're not finding that you feel better, that you're missing something. And there's 4 triggers for chronic inflammation, whether you want to call it sears or any other form of autoimmune chronic inflammation. The first trigger's food, which is a requirement. With mold, you've got to be on a mold-free diet when you get out of the mold. I mean, because if you're eating grains, if you're eating high amounts of dried processed fruits, if you're eating high amounts of certain things like peanuts or drinking coffee, these are all foods that are heavily contaminated with mycotoxins. And if you're trying to get mycotoxins out of you, using binders and other things, you'll never get them out of you. And you're already hypersensitized if you've been living in mold. So now you become reactive to your diet because your diet can also contain mycotoxins. It's why it's so important to change the diet as well. So I mean, what I'm trying to do, Laura, is just give you some insight and feedback into the appropriate things to recover, so that you can have a better conversation with your current doctor and maybe get better to the bottom of it if you feel like it's taken too long. What's the best thing to do for S-curve in the spine? Exercise and strengthen your posterior chain. Depending on the extent of your S-curve, I don't know what your curvature is, from a degree perspective. Usually with S-curves, there's multiple angles the doctor will give you as far as it's concerned, but physical therapy, chiropractic care is a great thing. I have a chiropractor neighbor who does, they do soft bracing, and I've seen them do amazing work. If you haven't checked out soft bracing with manipulation and physical rehab, I've seen them take, curves that, traditional, just straight chiropractic could never correct, but with soft bracing, really get some, mega improvements in angular curvature. But the core of your straightening, they're not going to be able to probably straighten it 100%. I haven't seen that, depending on the extent of the curve. But the core of it should be you learning to do exercise to strengthen and shore up your spine and getting the right nutrients. Because a lot of the scoliosis, if it's severe from childhood, that has its roots in B vitamin deficiency during pregnancy. So any of those of you that are pregnant moms watching this, you better make sure you're getting enough folate, because it's that folate deficiency that can really create problems in the spine, including the curvature of the spine. So you've got to make sure your nutrition's dialed in. So the nutrition and the exercise component are, in my opinion, very, very critical. How do you treat chronic EBV infection? You don't. Again, this is just my opinion, but everyone's got EBV. There's people out there online. There's experts or so-called experts, mediums and the like, that are claiming that Epstein-Barr is the plague of humanity and causes everything under the sun. And the reality is that 80% of the population, if you measure them, will have Epstein-Barr antibodies, and that doesn't mean that Epstein-Barr is what's making them sick or making you sick. Epstein-Barr is, you're going to see higher titers in your blood when you're doing things wrong, because the Epstein-Barr, it's a guilt by association issue. Epstein-Barr isn't the cause of your problem. It's a consequence of your problem. You have Epstein-Barr in you, and when your immune system can't hold it at bay, then your antibody titers are going to go up and you're going to find more. So you've got to figure out what's damaging your immune system. The top 4 categories of things: food, chemical exposures, nutrition deficiencies, and microbes are things that can really put pressure on the immune system and lead to kind of an Epstein-Barr elevation that the doctors didn't want to treat patients for. And I've just never found a case where somebody had Epstein-Barr titers that were high, where we actually needed to think about treating the Epstein-Barr. You don't treat the illness, you treat the patient. You treat their behaviors, you change their behaviors, you empower them to make better decisions, and the body knows how to do the rest. And that's just my opinion on the matter. Is there a supplement which might help a young 18-year-old girl with hyperkinetic gallbladder? Not really. I mean, you got to figure out why it's happening, Debbie. And there are a number of different reasons why. The first suspicion that comes to my mind is gluten. I don't know if she's gluten-free at this point or grain-free, but that would be the first suggestion. Beyond any supplement, I would make that suggestion first. Let's see. I've been on the carnivore diet for 1 year. Just got my lipid panel results. My total cholesterol is 972, triglycerides 77, cholesterol ratio 13:1, non-HDL cholesterol 898. Thoughts? It's not enough to unpack. It's pretty high cholesterol, and as I mentioned earlier, if your cholesterol is up over 400, now we're talking about a potential for a problem. Now, what most people think of as high cholesterol is cholesterol in the above 200, which that number has been manipulated so many times in the last 20 years by special interests that that we have to kind of take that number with a grain of salt. But if you're at 972, I mean, my thoughts would be you need to get with a good functional doctor who understands cardiovascular inflammation and have the right testing done to make sure there's nothing else that's posing a risk factor for you. And I might even consider recommending like a calcium score test and a Doppler to ensure that you don't have any arterial issues or plaque issues, for formation. Because at that level, that's what we call high. That's a true high cholesterol. What was it before you went carnivore? Maybe that's another question that needs to be entertained. I use coconut charcoal instead of cholestyramine to detox. Oh, just a comment. Yep, that's something you can do. Charcoal's great for detoxification. Do you know anything about pyrrole disorder? Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I've got a special interview coming out with Dr. Greenblatt, who's a functional psychiatrist, where we do a little bit of a dive into pyrrole disease. So stay tuned. That's going to be out here in the next few weeks. Consult tree. Oh, see, I answered that one. Carol says, I'm trying to heal my very sensitive gut, which I'm assuming could be SIBO. I can eat fermented cabbage recently, but finding it hard to take probiotics. you can tolerate fermented food, it's a great place to start. If you're looking at my probiotics, Carol, if you've had problems with probiotics in the past, I would recommend that you look at Biotic Force as the option to take. Usually that one works really well for people who have had sensitive natures toward other probiotics. Any tips for females turning 50 trying to balance hormones and up progesterone? Make sure you're eating enough fat. Progesterone's base is fat. You also need vitamin B5 and zinc to make progesterone. So make sure your levels there are okay. Some women find progesterone cream very helpful in that regard, but I would be searching more specifically for why the progesterone is low. Or is it low because you're going into menopause and your body is reducing its quantitative production of progesterone? I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. You might find we did a show on hormones a few months ago. If you search my YouTube channel, go to my crash course library and just type in hormones, and you can pull that up and get a much deeper dive on the topic. I like this comment. Cutting grain was an absolutely fantastic thing to do for my health. Thanks for your feedback. That may encourage someone else. Is drinking homemade milk kefir better than any other probiotic, or is taking a capsule better? I'm a fan of food. I think food, there's unknowns about food, but food's been around for a long time, and humans have done really, really well with whole, real food. Supplements generally don't contain the intrinsic wisdom that food does. And so anytime we can get something through food, we start there first. And if that's not enough, or if it's not working well enough, then we can kind of gravitate towards supplementation. But again, there's a lot of variance to that question too, because many people are reactive to dairy, and so using kefir may not be the best move for that particular kind of individual. But all things being equal, I definitely would encourage food-based probiotics. I need help with histamine, multiple nutrition deficiencies. Not sleeping, severe histamine, what that rings to me, Valerie, that rings to me mold as a potential, because mold can cause tremendous sleep disruption, and it can also cause mast cell activation. So you might talk to Dr. Driscoll about those things if you haven't already. Best way to lower parathyroid hormone after a long-term calcium and vitamin D deficiency? Yeah, supplementing with calcium and vitamin D. I mean, parathyroid hormone generally will go up when you have deficiencies of those nutrients. So you've got to start there. Start with that's a primary cause, or can be, of hyperparathyroid. If you do micronutrient tests, should you be off your supplements? No, you don't have to be, Kersey. If you're doing the Gluten-Free Society micronutrient test, you don't have to be off your supplements. The test measures an average of the last 6 months. So, you just go get the test done, and it's going to give you a good credit card on or not credit card, but a report card on your nutrition. Is organic coffee better? In what regard? It's definitely better than non-organic coffee because of the pesticide. But you've got to be careful with coffee for other reasons. Many people are sensitive to caffeine, especially with pre-existing autoimmunity. Now, if you're not, organic coffee is great, but know that coffee can be highly contaminated with mold toxins. And so you'd want to make sure that you're using a brand of organic coffee that also does additional testing on mold toxins to ensure, the best quality and the best safety. Does marijuana cause hormone issues with the thyroid and testosterone? Yes, to both. I'm not a fan of marijuana. It's not to say there aren't people that don't benefit from THC or haven't benefited, in their pain management. But as a general rule, unless you have some kind of true medical need, there's a reason why we call it dope. It damages brain cells and it damages endocrine tissue. And if you're doing it long term, you're asking for a problem, especially the varieties of today's world. I mean, you go back 30, 40 years ago to the 70s when people would grow it. Now you've got all these synthetic designer types, which are much more concentrated and much stronger than just like natural things. It's like the GMO of marijuana. It's no different than, should you eat a bunch of GMO foods? Generally, those are not something that we want to entertain. My doctor wants me to test for celiac disease, but I've been eating gluten-free since February. How long do I have to eat gluten for it to show up in my test for accurate results? A couple months. Now, if you feel better, Solange, what's the premise of testing? I mean, if you're just trying to confirm a celiac diagnosis, I get that. Maybe you want to have that as a diagnosis. But the reality is, if you feel better, listen to your body. And if you want a non-invasive way to understand gluten sensitivity, not necessarily celiac disease, but gluten sensitivity, do genetic testing. You can do that. You ask your GI doctor to do that test as well, but or you could do it from Gluten-Free Society. We offer genetic testing for gluten sensitivity as well as non-celiac gluten sensitivity gene patterns. So that's one way to get an accurate assessment of gluten risk. Yeah, Larry says, I found kimchi at the large Korean mart. Really helps me. I get a gallon for $23 and it lasts for a month. That's great. Food-based. Okay, let's see. I think we got to wrap it up. It's time. Look, thanks for tuning in today. If you've found help or benefit in this, I really appreciate you helping us. Our mission here is to help save 100 million lives, and we can't do that without your sharing. So pass this along to somebody you feel like might be benefited by it, and hit that like button. And if you're not already, hit that subscribe button. And those of you who want to support us, there's 3 ways you can do that. One is through sharing. The other is through Gluten-Free Society. Come to Gluten-Free Society. We appreciate your patronage. Like I said earlier, we've got over 100 supplements and different lab tests that can be done directly there. And that's what keeps the lights on around here. And that's what allows us to make this show possible for you. So appreciate your support in that regard. The other way you can support us is come visit us at Moldjacked, especially if you're thinking that you might be dealing with mold. Moldjacked.com is our new site where we're publishing a lot of wonderful free information to help people navigate the world and the complexities of mold. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back Tuesday for another episode of Dr. Osborne's Zone. Take care.